Now, the Syrian delegation has walked out on a session of the non-aligned movement currently underway in Tehran. They were angered at a speech by Egyptian leader Mohamed Morsi, who called President Assad's regime oppressive. High hopes were put on the gathering of the states who don't consider themselves allies of major Western powers and their ability to negotiate a solution to the Syrian crisis. Let's discuss the implications of this now with the journalist and broadcaster Neil Clark coming live on the programme. Good to see you today. Syria's foreign minister has said that Morsi's comments amount to inciting further violence in the country. What do you think?
Well, I think the problem I had with the speech was that it was so unbalanced. I mean, he didn't criticise the rebels at all. I mean, the rebels have been responsible for much of the violence in Syria. The government, fair enough, too. But, you know, there were bombs going off this week at funerals, 12 people killed. He didn't make any mention of that. So I can understand the Syrians feeling very aggrieved by what he said.
But don't you agree that, I mean, Morsi would have foreseen that his statement, however accurate or inaccurate, certainly would have angered the Syrians and the hosts of the summit for that matter. What do you think his motivation is here?
Well, you know, a very simple answer, brown envelopes. We've got to bear in mind the fact that Egypt receives about $1.56 billion in aid. And on top of that, back in August, they received $2 billion from Qatar. And of course, the US and Qatar are two of the leading hawks on Syria. So when you're receiving that much money from the US and Qatar, it's hardly surprising that you go to a summit and you criticize Syria. It's not a big surprise, really.
So the new Egyptian leader, Mohamed Morsi, perhaps already signalling his friendship with the West, or possibly Capitol Hill, as you say, with these brown envelopes. Do you think that with the whole summit going on and you know, 120 member states being represented here, do you think they can come to something to resolve the ongoing crisis in Syria?
Well, I think the key player in this, Rory, is the US. I mean, the US is the main party that's stoking this up. The US and its allies, with Turkey, of course, as well. And unless we get a change of position from them, I don't really see what the NA movement can actually do. I think the ball's in the US's court, and all we're getting, I'm afraid, from Washington is more sort of right-wing rhetoric about arming rebels from Condoleezza Rice today. So unless we get a major shift there, it's not going to help, really. And I'm afraid Egypt's position isn't helping at all.
Well, certainly Mohamed Morsi, the new Egyptian leader, he appears to be on friendly terms with Iran, China and also Israel and the US, as we've been saying here. There had been a talk of a possible geopolitical shift in the Middle East. But do you think we can really take this new Egyptian leader at face value?
So that we can, I think people who think there will be a shift are going to be disappointed in the extreme because, of course, the financial hold that the West has over him. And he's trying to be all things to all people, isn't he? I mean, he's trying to be friendly with Israel and Iran. You know, it doesn't work. You have to make the choice and make a stand. If he, the Palestinian issue, if he wants to support the Palestinian people, then he can't, I'm afraid, be friends with the current Israeli regime.
I'm sorry, I do apologise for interrupting, but don't you think it's a bit bizarre? I mean, ultimately, here's Morsi making this comment that's angered the Syrians and probably many other people in attendance as well. Do you think he's trying to undermine the summit? Because here we have the UN chief, Ban Ki-moon. You know, America was saying to Ban Ki-moon, we don't want you to go. Ban Ki-moon said, no, I am going to go. Even Ban Ki-moon hasn't said anything as harsh as what Morsi's come out with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's all part of the plan to go there and to try and sabotage the summit, because I think that a lot of people were very naive about Egypt. They thought that there was going to be a meaningful change in Egypt foreign policy after what happened last year. But in fact, it's continuating. You know, it's the same thing. And I think Morsi, I think that's part of the game. The US will be very pleased with what he said.
Well, certainly, you know, some plans have been put on the table, some possible plans to resolve the crisis in Syria. Both Egypt and Iran have put forward plans to form mediator groups to try and resolve everything. Morsi suggests involving Egypt, Iran, Turkey and Saudi Arabia. Ahmadinejad suggests Egypt, Iran and Venezuela. Which one do you fancy the most?
Well, if you look at the first, I mean, you've got three countries, haven't you? Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Turkey, who actually want regime change in Syria, so they can hardly be honest brokers. They actually don't want an honest solution to this, a peaceful compromise solution. So I don't think anything that involves Saudi Arabia or Turkey is on the cards, really. I think that the second one is better. But as I said earlier, I think it doesn't matter what mediator groups we set up, which countries are on them. The key player in all of this is the US. The US is the one that's stoking this up. The US has to change its policies and to let Syrians sort out their own futures. Back out of Syria, then we can get some peace and dialogue.
Oh, as you say, so Washington, the US is the big player here, perhaps behind closed doors or behind the felted curtains. So Washington has said, though, that the whole non-aligned movement summit isn't worthy of any high-level attendance. That coming from the US State Department just the other day. Do you think such criticism is justified when you look at it? 120 states or countries being represented here, and they're saying that you guys don't amount to anything.
Well, it's 2/3 of the world, Rory, isn't it? It's 2/3 of the world, and the US has the arrogance to say it doesn't count. It's beyond chutzpah, really. Because, of course, the US wants us to believe that only it and its allies represent the international community. The international community is meeting now in Tehran, and the US doesn't like it. The fact is that the US is getting more and more isolated on Iran on a whole series of issues. South America, African countries, China, Russia. That is the world, and I think we're going to see more and more of a shift in the years to come. And the US power is in decline, and that's the reality, and that's what they don't like.
Journalist and broadcaster Neil Clark are live on our programme from Oxford. A great pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rory.